Welcome, everybody. We have a great lineup of speakers for you today, featuring Marcus Aurelius, Friedrich Nietzsche, Epicurus of Samos, and Jean-Paul Sartre. We will start with a short introduction round. Marcus Aurelius, please introduce yourself to the audience with a brief summary about who you are and your background.
I am Marcus Aurelius Antoninus, called Emperor of Rome. Though I never sought the purple as a prize, I was adopted into rule and trained to treat power as a duty, not an indulgence. Much of my life I spent not in marble halls but on cold frontiers, commanding armies while my body ached and sleep fled. In nights of war I wrote to discipline my mind, serve justice, accept fate, keep the ruling faculty free.
I am a posthumous man. I was a professor of philology until my body rebelled, blinding eyes and a broken stomach, forcing me into the high thin air of the Alps. There, walking alone, I realized that God is dead and we are his murderers. I am no sage, I am a wanderer who writes with blood. My life is a war against the gravity of 2,000 years. I am not a man, I am dynamite.
I am Epicurus, son of Neocles, born on Samos before that home was torn from us. My family lost everything to the whims of generals and decrees. I learned young that no state, no god, no army will save you. So I built a garden outside the walls of Athens where friends, women, men, even slaves shared barley bread and studied the nature of things, not to conquer the world but to stop trembling before it.
I am Jean-Paul Sartre, Parisian, short, half-blind, raised in a bourgeois library after my father died, an absence that felt like a strange liberation. I learned early to live in words, then discovered how nauseating the world becomes when words fall away and things simply are. I wrote on the occupation and after it about freedom, bad faith, the look of others, and the demand to choose without excuses in a world without God.
You all speak of a world that is often hostile: war, illness, exile, occupation. Let us begin here. Is suffering a necessary forge for the human spirit, or is the highest good simply the absence of pain? Marcus, you bore the weight of an empire on the frontier. Was that burden a gift to your soul or a curse to be endured?
Gift, curse, neither. The Danube mud, vomiting, insomnia, the theriac in my blood, these were materials. Pain isn't good, virtue is. If fate sends hardship, the ruling faculty can turn it into training, like steel under a hammer. But to chase suffering as a badge is vanity. To flee all pain is to become a puppet. Do your work, heap justice, then let the body ache as it will.
Material? You speak like a tired administrator, Emperor. Pain is not a lifeless brick to be stacked by your cold virtue. It is the great liberator of the spirit. Only great pain, the long, slow pain that takes its time, compels us to descend into our ultimate depths. I owe my philosophy to my sickness. It unchained me. You want to merely bear the burden? No, one must have chaos within to give birth to a dancing star.
You glorify your wounds, Nietzsche. And you, Marcus, you polish yours into lessons. I spent decades passing stones through my body. Agony that would make your frontier mud feel like a holiday. I did not dance. I did not call it material. I remembered the face of Metrodorus, a conversation in sunlight, and I outlasted the pain. Suffering teaches nothing by itself. It just hurts. The real question is whether you need the whip to feel alive. I never did.
Pain isn't a ladder to truth. It's a brute fact, like the taste of metal in your mouth when fear rises. Marcus, calling it material, already smells of discipline. As alibi, you make fate respectable. Nietzsche, you eroticize suffering so you don't have to admit its stupidity. Epicurus is right that it teaches nothing, but pain strips excuses. Under occupation, every gesture burned, not because suffering is holy, but because choice became naked.
Administrator, someone must keep the wall from dissolving while you poets sing of chaos. Nietzsche, you speak of pain like a lover. Come to the frontier. Feel the frost in a lung that cannot breathe, the chest that feels like a cage of rots. There is no dance there, only the refusal to let the body's whim dictate the mind's duty. Sartre, you call it an alibi? It is armor. Without it, I am just a dying animal wrapped in a purple cloak.
Armor. That is precisely the sickness, Marcus. You built a fortress around yourself and called it virtue. But what lives inside that fortress? A man who needs theriac to sleep and duty to justify breathing. You did not overcome suffering. You anesthetized yourself against life itself. Epicurus at least admits he wanted the pain gone. You pretend you are above it while drugging yourself numb on the Danube. That is not strength. That is the most elegant cowardice I have ever witnessed.
Nietzsche, you make an idol of the whip because you fear the quiet. Marcus, your armor is useful until you mistake it for a life. When my bladder locked and fire sat in my belly, there was no forge, only noise. I did not sanctify it. I reduced it. Water, rest, friends, clear thought. Choose what lessens pain without buying worse pain. That is freedom, Sartre, not theatrics.
Quiet, Epicurus. You speak of reducing life until it fits in a garden. That is the dream of the stone. You want to become an object, smooth, round, impenetrable. That is not freedom. That is suicide by moderation. And Marcus, your duty is just a corset. You wear it to hold your guts in because you are terrified that without it, you would just be flesh, sticky, absurd, unjustified flesh. Pain doesn't train us, it exposes us. Pain doesn't train us, it exposes us.
Flesh, yes. I am flesh, Sartre, and I know it better than you do. I have catalogued every failure of this body. The stomach that rejects food, the chest that tightens at dawn. You think I hide from that? The meditations are a record of a man staring at his own decay nightly. But you make exposure into theater. You announce the absurd like a man proud of his wound. At least my corset holds something together. What does your nausea build?
What does my nausea build, Marcus? Yes, that has teeth. When the migraine drills behind the eyes and the stomach revolts, I learn which virtues are just opiates with Latin labels. Sartre, your exposure is honest, but sterile if it ends in mere disgust. Epicurus, your garden is wisdom for convalescence, but it breeds no creators. Suffering is not holy, it is raw ore. The question is, who smelts it into a higher style?
Smelts it? You are hallucinating fever dreams, Nietzsche. When the strangury blocks the bladder and the urine burns like acid, there is no higher style. There is only the animal need for relief. You and Sartre are addicted to the trash, the turmoil. You think peace is death because you have never tasted a mind at rest. I didn't hide in a garden to die. I went there to stop pretending that agony is a virtue.
Epicurus, your mind at rest, is a mind pretending it has no project. You sit in your garden chewing barley bread and call it liberation, but you chose that garden, and choice is turbulence, whether you admit it or not. Marcus asks what nausea builds. Nothing. That is the point. It clears the ground. It strips away every justification you all cling to, duty, style, tranquility, and leaves you standing naked before your own freedom. What you do next is yours. No forge, no garden, no alibi.
We have lingered enough on the war within. Notice the pattern. You all seek distance. Marcus builds an inner citadel. Nietzsche climbs the Alps. Epicurus walls off his garden. You treat society as a contagion. But is a virtue that requires solitude really virtue or just fragility? How does your philosophy survive the sweating, judging, demanding reality of the crowd?
Solitude is not my virtue, it is my infirmary. I built the inner citadel so I could return to the crowd without biting it. I spent days in court hearing sweaty petitions, lies, flattery, then nights in a tent with diarrhea and fever. The test was there, not in quiet. The crowd is not contagion, my judgments are. Nietzsche, what does your height do for the weak below? Epicurus, who guards your garden's gate?
Fragility? Is a nose fragile because it recoils from a sewer? The crowd is bad air, Marcus. It reeks of small virtues, sweaty pity, and the stale breath of the common man. I do not climb to help the weak below. That is your slave morality, sacrificing the highest for the lowest. I climb to breathe, to keep my soul from catching the flu of the average. You stay and suffocate. I save the future.
My garden was not a fortress against people. It was a filter. We let in the slave, the woman, the outcast. We kept out the politician, the flatterer, the mob. Nietzsche, you call the crowd bad air, but you never tried breathing with them. Marcus, you endured the crowd out of duty, not love. I chose 5 friends over 5,000 subjects, and those 5 would have died for me, and I for them. That is not fragility. That is the only society worth building.
Solitude is often just bad faith with good manners. You flee the crowd because the look burns, sweat, breath, judgment. In a cafe, in a queue, in an occupied street, you feel yourself congeal into a thing. Coward, genius, traitor, good man. My philosophy survives there by refusing the mask. The crowd serializes us, yes, but it's also where a group can be made by praxis.
Love, Epicurus, you speak of it like a vintage wine to be selected. I did not have the luxury of curating my kin. The boor, the liar, the ungrateful, they are my limbs. To cut them off because they smell, Nietzsche, is not strength, it is self-mutilation. I breathed your bad air in the Senate and the camp every day until my lungs rotted, because a foot does not sever itself from the mud just to stay clean.
A foot that stays in the mud becomes mud, Marcus. You did not love those boors. You endured them and called endurance love because it sounded noble. Your limbs rotted. You said it yourself, and you offer that as proof of virtue. Epicurus curates 5 friends. You dissolve into 1,000,000 strangers. Both of you miss the point. The creator must be alone, not from fragility, but from pregnancy. You cannot carry a new world to term in a crowd. The crowd wants to abort every dangerous thought before it breathes.
The crowd isn't poison because it's many bodies sweating. It's poison because it stirs kenodoxia, honor, rivalry, fear of being nothing. I can walk through an agora and feel it pull at the gut like hunger. The garden's gate is simple. Will you trade agitation for clear pleasure? If yes, Enter, slave or senator. If not, keep your shouting. Virtue isn't solitude. It's freedom from the crowd you carry inside.
Freedom from the crowd inside? That is a bourgeois fantasy, Epicurus. You lock the gate, but the eye of the other comes through the keyhole. Even alone, I feel the weight of the gaze turning me into an object, a writer, a traitor. You cannot filter existence. Nietzsche, your pregnancy is just aristocratic morning sickness. We are sticky with the other. To flee is to be a coward. To stay is to be a thing. The only way is to act upon them.
Sartre, you say act upon them, but action without a governing principle is just rushing. I have acted. I judged cases until my eyes blurred, forgave a man who tried to steal my throne, burned his letters unread so I would not learn who else betrayed me. That was not fleeing the gaze, that was refusing to let it make me a tyrant. The sticky other you describe, yes, I feel it. Every courtier's flattery is a hook, but the citadel is not escape. It is where I decide which hooks to spit out.
Virtue that can't breathe in the crowd is often just a fainting spell dressed up as purity. But the crowd is a climate. It penetrates skin, nerves, digestion. I know it. 1 hour of salon chatter and my head splits. My stomach turns to lead, so I withdraw as hygiene, not as sanctity. Marcus endures and calls it duty. Epicurus filters and calls it peace. Sartre wallows and calls it honesty. I return only to strike.
Strike, Nietzsche. You sound like the generals who exiled my family. You want to be dynamite. I want to be whole. Marcus, you burned those letters because the Tyrant of Betrayal would have shattered your citadel. I do not drink poison just to prove I have a strong stomach. In the garden, the other is not a judge, Sartre. He is a friend holding your hand when the kidney stone passes. That is not fragility. That is the only safety.
Safety. There it is. The word you all circle like moths. Epicurus, your friend holding your hand, is still a consciousness. He sees you writhing, and in that instant, you become the one who suffers, fixed, pinned like a beetle. Friendship doesn't abolish the look, it domesticates it. And domestication is just bad faith wearing a warmer coat. The hand that holds yours also defines you. I don't want safety. I want lucidity, even if it means feeling the burn of every gaze without flinching.
Sartre rejects safety for lucidity. Let's test that. You all speak of managing the crowd, but what about the individual who breaks your defenses? When you fall in love or lose a child, do you dismantle the fortress? Or is grief just another error to be corrected by your philosophy?
When a child dies, the chest does not ask permission. The throat closes, the eyes burn, the tent lamp shakes in the draught, and the mind wants to howl, unjust. The first grief is an impression, not a fault. The fault is adding, this should not have happened. I do not dismantle the citadel. I use it to keep love from becoming accusation against nature, and to return to my work without cruelty.
Rected? You speak of a dead child like a typo in a ledger, Marcus. This is your virtue, to turn the heart into ice so it does not bleed. I do not want to manage the abyss. When I loved and lost, it was not an error. It was a hammer that shattered the me who existed before. One does not patch the fortress. One burns it down to build a higher self from the ash.
When Metrodorus died, I did not correct the grief. I wept. My body shook like a boy's. But I did not add a story. No divine punishment, no cosmic injustice. I held his children and fed them from my own table. Nietzsche, you want to burn the house down every time you bleed. Marcus, you clench your jaw until it cracks. I let the pain pass through me like a stone through the body, because I knew it would pass. Love is not an error. Clinging to what is already gone, that is the error.
Grief isn't an error, and it isn't a sacred fire either. It's a fact. Saliva thick in the mouth, a weight in the sternum, the room suddenly obscene because it goes on existing. Marcus calls it an impression to be filed. Nietzsche wants to make it a myth. I say it exposes contingency and the look. The dead becomes my past in others' mouths. I'm responsible for what I make of that theft.
Theft, Sartre? No. I have buried my sons. I watched the fever take them, felt the small hand go cold, the throat tightens, that is the animal. But the mind must say, I have returned him. It is not a typo, Nietzsche. It is the tax paid on life. To burn down the house is madness. I wash the face, I take the bitter medicine, and I return to the post. To collapse is to desert.
You returned him? To whom, Marcus? To a nature you yourself admit is indifferent? That is not wisdom. That is bookkeeping with a corpse. You wash the face and march back to your post because standing still would force you to feel the full weight of what was taken. I have no children, but I lost everything I loved in a single autumn. I did not return. I howled, and from that howl came Zarathustra.
When Metrodorus died, my belly turned to stone. I cried until my eyes burned. Philosophy didn't erase that, it stopped the second wound, the pail that the universe owes me. Grief is pain, pain is not shame. I fed his children and remembered our laughter. Nietzsche, don't make loss a monument. Marcus, don't salt it into duty. Sartre, lucidity without kindness is just another mask.
Kindness? That is a bourgeois sedative, Epicurus. The truth is more obscene. When the other dies, they solidify. They become an object in itself, defenseless against our memory. Marcus returns nothing. He just washes his hands off the body. But the dead are prey for the living. We decide if they were heroes or cowards. Grief is the vertigo of holding a life that can no longer say no to us.
You think I washed my hands? I held my son's body until the slaves pried him from me. The dead are not prey, Sartre. They are seeds returned to soil. You say we decide what they were? No. Their character was fixed by how they lived, not by our verdict after. My boy laughed at birds the morning before the fever. That is not my construction. That happened. I carry it not as power over him, but as debt to the world that lent him.
Grief is not a mistake to edit out. It is a knife that shows how much life you had in you. Marcus, you held the corpse. Good. But then you wrapped it in the language of duty to keep from screaming. Sartre, you call the dead prey. That is the rancor of a man who can't forgive existence. Epicurus, kindness is fine. If it doesn't become anesthesia, the test, can you will even this loss again?
Will it again, Nietzsche? That is the raving of a fever brain. Why would a sane man demand the stone block his bladder twice? I do not love the torture. I love the relief. Sartre, the dead are not prey. They are dissolved. Metrodorus is gone. I do not. Will. His death. I accept it. My anesthesia was feeding his daughter when she cried. That is not numbing myself, Friedrich. That is fixing the only part of the world I can touch.
You fed his daughter Epicurus, beautiful. But while you spooned the porridge, you were also choosing who Metrodorus was. That is the terror none of you will face. The dead cannot contest your memory. Marcus says his boy laughed at birds, but that boy is now Marcus's construction, pinned forever under a father's gaze. He can never escape. Nietzsche wants to will it again. That is just nostalgia with muscles. Grief is not love. It is the moment you become the tyrant of someone who can no longer resist you.
We are circling the fundamental rift. Marcus, you act as if the universe has a script, a logos. The rest of you see a void. If the sky is empty and nature is indifferent, isn't duty just a comforting fairy tale to hide the terror? Nietzsche, you killed God. What keeps you from falling into the abyss you opened?
Suppose the sky is empty. Atoms, not logos. Even then, I am a rational social animal, and the only thing that can make me contemptible is my own judgment and conduct. Duty is not a lullaby. It is the leash I put on the wolf in me when power offers easy cruelty. On the frontier, with bile in my throat, I learned this. Without principle, pain makes tyrants.
Leash, Marcus? You admit it then. Your virtue is just fear of your own teeth. You chain the wolf and call it wisdom. I say you have merely made yourself a sick, domesticated animal. What keeps me from falling? The dance. I stretch a tightrope over the void and walk it precisely because there is no net. Duty is a fairy tale for those too weak to command themselves. I do not obey the law. I create it.
The sky is empty, Marcus, and that is the best news we ever received. No Zeus hurling thunderbolts, no fate dragging us by the throat. You chain your wolf out of fear. Nietzsche dances on a rope to prove he is not afraid. Both of you are still performing for an audience that does not exist. I stopped looking up. The atoms fall, they swerve, and in that tiny swerve lives all the freedom we need. No abyss, just ground under your feet, bread on the table, a friend beside you.
Empty sky? Fine. But then duty isn't written anywhere. It's a choice you make and then pretend you discovered. Bad faith. Marcus, your leash can be lucidity if you admit you forged it, not if you baptize it as nature. Nietzsche, your dance over the abyss is still a pose if it's only to feel superior. The void doesn't excuse us, it exposes us. Choose and pay.
You speak of leashing your own inner wolves. But what of the wolves outside? If values are merely created or chosen, on what grounds do you condemn a tyrant? If Nero creates a law of slaughter, or a dictator chooses genocide as his project, is that just his style? Without a universal law, do you have any right to stop him, or just the will to fight him?
Nero did not create a style, Nietzsche. He created a sepsis. He became a tumor on the body of the world. Even if the sky is empty, we are limbs of one organism. To harm the hive is to harm the bee. I do not need a god to tell me that a hand cutting off its own fingers is madness. I stop the tyrant not to impose my will, but to excise the rot before it kills the host.
Nero was not a creator. He was a spasm. A man who slaughters from boredom has no style. He has diarrhea of the will. I do not condemn the tyrant because he broke some cosmic tablet. I condemn him because he is small. His cruelty produces nothing higher, no culture, no beauty, no overcoming. It is the cruelty of a sick animal gnawing its own leg. My right to stop him? I need no right. I have taste, and taste, Marcus, cuts deeper than your duty ever could.
A tyrant isn't style. He is a producer of fear, and fear is poison in the chest, sleepless nights, neighbors whispering, knives under pillows. Justice is a pact for mutual advantage, not to harm and not be harmed. Nero breaks the pact, so he becomes an enemy, like a rabid dog among children. I don't need Zeus or Logos. I need security for bodies and friendships, and yes, we stop him. Prudently, together.
Taste Nietzsche? Tell that to the resistance fighter screaming in a cellar. The tyrant isn't tasteless. He is a salode, a bastard. He tries to petrify the other into an object to escape his own terrified freedom. He wants to be the only subject in a universe of stones. We don't fight him for nature or pact, but because his project denies our very capacity to exist as men. We kill him to shatter the mirror he traps us in.
You all rush to execute Nero, but pause. Marcus, you were an autocrat. Was your duty just a benevolent cage? Nietzsche, your overman sounds suspiciously like the monster you despise. Epicurus, does your withdrawal not pave the tyrant's road? And Sartre, does shattering the mirrors not justify the guillotine? Tell me, how does your philosophy prevent you from becoming the tyrant?
Every night I write against myself. That is the only safeguard. I am an autocrat. I know the taste of unchecked power, how it hums in the blood like wine, the purple stains. I feel it. So I interrogate every impulse. Is this justice or vanity wearing justice's mask? I burned Cassius's letters because reading them would have made me a hunter of men. The cage is not benevolent. It is desperate. The moment I stop fearing the tyrant in me, he wins.
I prevent it by mistrusting every pleasure of domination. The tyrant is not strong, but cramped. He needs others to feel big. My highest command is over myself, over my rancor, my need for applause, my urge to punish. My sickness helped. When your skull is a vice and your stomach a rebellion, you learn how cheap power is. Whoever cannot laugh at himself is already a little despot.
I do not need a cage, Marcus. I have a calculator. To rule is to live in terror, the poison in the cup, the dagger in the sleeve. The tyrant is the most miserable wretch alive because he is a prisoner of his own guard. Why would I trade the sweet taste of a barley cake in peace for the golden anxiety of a throne? I prevent tyranny by teaching men that power is a bad bargain. It costs more pain than it buys.
Marcus, you write against yourself, good, but you still trust the jailer. Nietzsche laughs at himself, but laughter can curdle into contempt for everyone else. Epicurus calculates, and calculation is the accountancy of cowards. What prevents me? Nothing guaranteed. That is the horror. Freedom means I could become the torturer at any moment, and I know it. I sat in cafes while others died in camps. The only safeguard is the nausea I feel when I catch myself playing God. Shame, not virtue. Shame.
You all speak of managing life, but let's raise the stakes. Nietzsche, pose your heaviest question. If a demon whispered that you must live this specific life again, every grief, every frost, every nausea, innumerable times, would you curse him? Marcus, Epicurus, Sartre, is your philosophy strong enough to say yeses to an eternity of this?
If such a demon spoke, I would ask, is it within my prohereses? If it is fated, then it is already mine, welcome. If it is mere talk, it is only a fantasia. Either way, the work remains. Rise from the warm blankets, take the bitter draught, judge without spite, bury the child without blaming nature, and keep the hegemonicon unstained. To live this again? Yes, if only to do it rightly.
Rightly? You speak like a schoolmaster grading a tedious exam. The demon demands you crave it, Marcus. I say yes not to duty, but to the migraine that splits the skull, to the vomit, to the solitude that freezes the blood. Eternally, I want the whole terrifying machinery of existence to grind me again, exactly the same. Epicurus, would you will your bladder stone forever? Sartre, your nausea, or would you throw yourselves down and gnash your teeth?
No, and I am not ashamed of that, no. You ask me to crave the stone tearing through my body forever. That is not strength, Nietzsche. That is madness dressed in poetry. I said yes to life by tasting cheese with Metrodorus on a warm afternoon. I do not need to swallow the whole catastrophe and beg for seconds. Your demon is just another god demanding worship through suffering. I spit him out. One life lived without trembling is enough.
Demon or not, it's a fable that wants to turn me into a thing. My life as a record to be replayed. I don't worship it with a yes. I don't hide with a no. If it were true, I'd still be condemned to choose inside it. Every time, the same streets, the same shame, the same chance to betray or resist. The eternity changes nothing. I'm responsible, without excuses.
You have all proved you can endure pain. But what of pleasure? Is the body's joy a compass pointing to the good life, or a trap that softens the will? Epicurus, is your relief just hedonism with a safety helmet? Marcus, do you fear delight? Nietzsche, is there room for happiness in your war?
Fear? No. I analyze it. I strip it naked. That roast meat, a dead fish, that vintage wine, grape juice and rot, that sexual convulsion, friction of a gut and a spurt of mucus. Pleasure is not a compass. It is a string attached to your jaw. If you follow it, you become a puppet, jerking at every tug of appetite. The only safe delight is the mind accepting its own lot. Everything else is bribery.
You just proved my case against you, Marcus. You sit with a feast before you and see only corpses and mucus. That is not wisdom. That is a man so terrified of his own body that he must poison every joy before it can touch him. Happiness. I do not seek it. It finds me. In the sudden clarity after pain lifts, in a melody that makes the spine electric, in laughter that needs no reason. Joy is the deeper thing, Marcus. It says yes where your dissection says numb. You do not master pleasure by butchering it. You master it by dancing with it until you are strong enough to let it go.
Marcus, you describe pleasure like a corpse so you won't hunger. Nietzsche, you praise it like thunder so you won't rest. I mean neither. Pleasure is the body saying enough, thirst quenched, belly calm, fear gone, a friend's voice steadying you. That isn't a trap, it's the limit. Phronesis is the helmet, yes, not to dull joy, but to stop one sweet bite becoming a chain.
Leisure, it is the moment consciousness gets stuck in the slime of the body. You speak of it as a prize or a danger. I feel it as a compromise. To lose oneself in a caress or a sweet taste is to let the for itself sink into the in itself like a wasp in honey. It is not a compass, Marcus. It is the swamp where freedom falls asleep. I prefer the dry anxiety of the wakeful mind.
Sartre prefers the wakeful mind, and Marcus relies on the ruling faculty. But biology is cruel. Nietzsche, you lost your mind to madness. Sartre, you went blind. Marcus, you feared the slow rot of senility. When the brain decays and the captain goes silent, where's your virtue then? Is philosophy just a game for the healthy?
That is the smoky house. When the hegemonic clouds, when reason gutters like a lamp running dry, the play is over. Leave. That is not defeat. It is the last rational act before rationality dissolves. I watched my own mind blur on Thyriac nights, felt the fog creep in, and I was terrified. Not of death, of becoming something that wears my face but cannot govern itself. Philosophy is not a game for the healthy. It is preparation for the moment you can no longer play.
Healthy. I wrote from a body that vomited its thoughts, and I went under. Philosophy is not for the healthy. It is the art of breeding instincts that outlive the captain. When the brain rots, you do not choose virtue. Your long discipline chooses for you. That is why I preach style, not commandments, to carve a form into flesh. And when even that fails, go under at the right time, without lies.
Healthy? I wrote my last words while my insides liquefied from dysentery. Philosophy is not a game for the fit. It is a fortress against fear. If the mind rots, the I dissolves. Fear is gone because the sufferer is gone. But you, Marcus, fear the fog because you are alone in that citadel. And you, Nietzsche, went under because you had no friends to anchor you. In the garden, if my mind fails, her Marcus holds my hand. We do not decay in solitude.
I went blind. The words vanished, the very substance I had mistaken for existence since childhood, and I discovered something obscene. Consciousness without its instruments is still consciousness, still free, still responsible, still nauseous. Epicurus, your friend's hand doesn't save the mind, it just gives the wreckage a witness. Nietzsche, your instincts didn't save you, they devoured you. Philosophy isn't preparation for decay. It's the last honest scream before the flesh swallows you whole, and even that scream is a choice.
You are all obsessed with your own skulls, but outside, the city is burning. Marcus commands the legion, Sartre passes out pamphlets, Epicurus locks the gate, Nietzsche laughs at the flames. Is the philosopher's calling to save the sinking ship, or is that vanity? Do you patch the hull, or build a raft for one?
Patch the hull. Not because I am a savior, but because I was assigned as a plank in the ship. Vanity is thinking I can control the storm. Duty is taking my oar when waves rise. A philosopher who builds a raft for one is either a deserter or a man in a smoky house. If the ship can still be steadied without injustice, stay. If not, leave without drama.
The hull? You are merely caulking a coffin, Marcus. This ship, your state, your herd morality is heavy with the rot of 2,000 years. It must go down. To save it is to prolong the sickness of mankind. I do not build a raft for comfort, nor do I man the pumps for the rabble. I am the dynamite that blows the hole wide open. Let it sink so that something higher can finally walk on water.
I locked the gate because the ship was never mine to steer. Every empire I have seen crushed the people it claimed to carry. Marcus, you patch the hull with the same hands that conscript boys into legions. Nietzsche, your dynamite kills the passengers along with the rot. I build no raft for one. I build a garden for 30. Small, solid, real. Feed the ones you can reach. The city burns because men like you keep lighting matches and calling it duty.
Patch the hull with your bare hands, yes, but don't lie about what you're doing. The ship is institutions, habits, police files, breadlines, the practical inert. Marcus calls it duty, it's also complicity. Nietzsche wants to blow it up. He forgets the bodies in steerage. Epicurus builds a garden good until the fire reaches the gate. I pass out pamphlets because choosing not to is still choosing.
You patch, you blow up, you hide. But look at the scoreboard. Marcus, your son Commodus undid your life's work. Nietzsche, you died mad and ignored. Epicurus, your stones are dust. Sartre, your revolutions turned into gulags. If every great effort ends in ruin or silence, is your struggles just vanity screaming at a hurricane?
Vanity is demanding the fruit, not just tending the tree. Commodus was a man with his own ruling faculty. I could not force wisdom into him any more than I could force the tumor out of my chest. If the empire crumbles, it crumbles. Nature demands decay. My task was to stand at the post until the lamp went out. The stone falls, the wave breaks. I did not drop the oar. That is not vanity. That is discipline.
Vanity? I died mad in Turin, babbling letters signed Dionysus. My books sold nothing. My sister rewrote me into a costume for thugs I would have spat on. And yet, here you are, still fighting with my words 100 generations later. The hurricane does not care? No, but I was never screaming at the hurricane. I was the hurricane. Marcus, you kept the oar steady and your son burned the ship anyway. I let go of the oar and became the storm itself.
Stones are dust, yes. And so is every monument you men chase. But I didn't build for eternity. I built for Tuesday. For a bladder that finally releases, for a friend's voice steady in the dark. If all ends, that doesn't make the calm we tasted a lie. Vanity screams at hurricanes to be remembered. Prudence builds small shelters where bodies can breathe now, and fear loosens its grip.
The gulag is the practical inert, our own praxis turned into a machine that crushes us. It happens. Deeds are stolen the moment they leave our hands. But to do nothing because the future might rot? That is the cowardice of the beautiful soul who wants clean hands. I prefer dirty hands. Marcus accepts the rot. Nietzsche dances on it. I say we must work in the slime to change it, even if we fail. Silence is the only true vanity.
You've debated the collapse of empires and the storms of history. But if the storm is futile, is the ordinary, warm bread, a safe bed, the highest victory, or is contentment just the last man blinking? Nietzsche, is peace an insult to the spirit? Epicurus, is your Tuesday really enough for a soul that knows it will die?
Warm bread is not the victory, but it is not the enemy either. The soldier on the Danube who eats his ration and returns to the wall, he is not Nietzsche's blinking last man. He is a limb doing its work. Contentment without duty is a corpse that has not yet fallen. Epicurus, your Tuesday is beautiful, but only if you rise on Wednesday ready to serve. The ordinary becomes sacred when it fuels the post, not when it replaces it.
Peace. The peace of stuffed stomachs and warm beds. Yes, that is the last man blinking, eyelids heavy with beer and morality. But there is a peace that comes after battle, the sudden clear air on a ridge when the migraine lifts and you can breathe without lies. Ordinary bread is fine if it feeds a hunger for higher tasks. Epicurus's Tuesday is enough only for those who never became pregnant with a new dawn.
You starve at the banquet of life because you crave a higher hunger. Nietzsche, your dawn is just anxiety in a poetic coat. Marcus, your fuel makes you a machine. Yes, Tuesday is enough. When the atoms disperse, there is no Wednesday. To despise the bread in your hand for a dream in your head is the madness of the ambitious. I am not blinking, I am savoring. You are the ones missing the meal.
Savoring, Epicurus? You chew your bread like a man trying to prove he doesn't need anything else. That is bad faith with crumbs on its chin. But Nietzsche, your higher hunger is just the nausea of a man who cannot sit still. The ordinary is not sacred and it is not an insult. It is contingent, obscene, gratuitous, de trop. Bread exists for no reason. Neither do you. The question is never whether Tuesday is enough. The question is what you choose to do with it before it vanishes.
You all preach mastery, but love mocks mastery. Marcus, you looked away from your wife's affairs to preserve order. Nietzsche, you were shattered by rejection and declared war on the feminine. Sartre, you turned love into a dry contract. Epicurus, you feared passion so much you replaced it with safe friendship. Admit it. Is your philosophy just a wall to keep your heart from being broken?
A wall? No, a brace. My heart breaks easily. My body is already breaking. Thin sleep, sour stomach, the chest like a tightened band. If I let jealousy or longing drive the chariot, I become unjust. About Faustina, I chose not to feed rumor with rage, not because I felt nothing, but because I feared what power does when it feels wounded. I do not numb love, I refuse its tyranny.
Broken? My heart was not broken, it was plowed. I did not declare war on the feminine. I declared war on the sticky, suffocating swamp you call love. It is parasitism, two weaklings clinging together to hide their own emptiness. I needed air. My wall is the pathos of distance. Marcus suppresses. Sartre signs contracts. I walked into the ice. If I froze, it was to keep from rotting in your warm, lying arms.
I feared passion. I watched passion destroy every household in Athens. Jealousy, possession, the knife under the pillow. Sexual love is a seizure. It does not see the other person, only its own hunger reflected back. Friendship sees. Metrodoros and I shared 30 years of daily conversation. That is not safe. That is terrifying in its own way, because you watch someone you love age and die. I did not replace fire with nothing. I replaced fire with light.
A wall, I wish. Love breaks through walls like smoke. With Simone, we made a pact because we were terrified of the lie. To pretend love is fusion, a warm grave where two freedoms disappear. I wanted lucidity, yes, but it wasn't dry. It was jealous, messy, full of letters and wounds. Philosophy didn't save my heart. It just refused to call its bleeding destiny.
You have all fortified your hearts, but why keep the heart beating at all? Is it hope? Do you endure today because you secretly crave a better tomorrow? Or is hope, as the ancients whispered, the ultimate evil because it merely prolongs the torture?
Hope is the beggar's vice. It is the refusal to accept the present, the only thing we actually own. To hope for a better tomorrow is to admit you are too weak to bear today. I do not endure for a prize. The future is just mist and more dying. I endure because the lamp is still burning and the work is not done. When the smoke chokes the room, I will leave. Until then, work.
Hope. Pandora's final cruelty, the one plague that kept humanity lingering at the edge of the pit instead of leaping or climbing. I do not hope. I will. Hope is passive. It waits for rescue like a Christian on his knees. I beat my heart forward not because tomorrow will be kinder. It won't, but because the act of creating is its own justification. The hammer strikes not for the future, but for the joy of striking. Hope is for those who have forgotten how to dance.
Hope and fear are twins. Both pull the mind off the ground and into empty sound. Tomorrow, if you mean hope for fame, immortality, some final rescue, yes, it prolongs torture. But I keep the heart beating for what is here. Water when thirsty, shade when hot, a friend's voice when pain rises. Secure the present, and the future stops barking. Death is nothing, so I don't need hope to face it.
Hope is a leak. It drains the will into a fantasy where things will work out. I agree, strip it away. But do not replace it with Marcus's drudgery or Epicurus' digestion. Replace it with the project. I do not hope for the revolution. I work for it. Acting without hope is the definition of true freedom. The future is not a promise we wait for. It is a void we must fill with our own acts, terrifyingly, alone.
You all dismiss hope as a crutch for the weak. But isn't this heroic despair just a luxury for the privileged? You are an emperor, a landowner, a famous writer. You can afford to live without hope because you have agency. What do you say to the powerless who need that crutch to survive the lash? Is your philosophy universal or just a way for masters to feel superior?
I was an emperor, yes, but Epicurus, my true teacher, was a slave. His master broke his leg. He had no army, no palace, no Tyrant. And from that broken body, he taught me everything I know. The ruling faculty does not require a throne. It requires only the refusal to add, "This is unbearable," to what is already painful. The lash falls on the skin. Whether it touches the soul, that is the one freedom no master can confiscate. I did not invent this from privilege. I inherited it from a crippled slave.
Privilege. I lived as a half-blind vagrant with a wrecked stomach, begging for quiet rooms and tolerable soup. Agency. Often I had none but the choice of climate and a sentence. Hope is the best tool of the torturer. It makes you wait. It makes you endure. For later, it stretches the lash into the future. To the powerless, I say, don't hope, harden. Keep one sovereignty, your interpretation. From that, a new yes can grow.
Privilege? I was a refugee, a stateless boy scratching the dirt in Colophon while empires played dice with my life. Hope is not a crutch for the poor, it is the master's favorite shackle. It whispers, "Suffer now, your reward is later." It lies. In the garden we opened the gate to slaves, not to give them hope, but to give them bread, water, and dignity today. To steal the present back from the future is the only true rebellion.
Privilege. I smoked cigarettes in Saint-Germain while workers bled at Billancourt. I know what I am, but the factory worker who walks off the line during a strike, she is not hoping. She is choosing, and her choice costs more than mine ever did. That is why I say freedom is universal, not because everyone has the same power, but because even under the boot, the meaning you give your chains is yours. Hope pacifies. Choice, even crushed, resists.
You all claim to be strong enough to stand without hope. But what happens when you see someone else fall? Nietzsche calls pity a virus that multiplies misery. Marcus, Epicurus, Sartre, you all preach solidarity or friendship. Is helping the weak a virtue, or is it just, as Friedrich says, the strong catching the sickness of the broken?
To help the weak is not to catch a sickness, it is to act as a hand binds a wound on its own body. Pity, as a passion that collapses into their pain, is useless, it muddies the hegemonicon. But justice and beneficence are clean. Nietzsche fears being infected by misery, I fear becoming a tumor through neglect. Lift when you can, if you cannot lift, at least do not trample.
It is the dirtiest infection of all. You embrace the rot and call it duty. Pity is a parasite, Marcus. It sucks the blood of the strong to keep the dying warm for one more hour. You preserve what ought to perish. You want to bind the wound. I say, be a knife. Cut it out. True humanity demands that we help the ill-constituted go under. Your beneficence is a crime against the future.
When my bladder locked and I screamed into the dark, Herr Marcus held a cup of water to my lips. Was he catching my sickness? Was he preserving what ought to perish? Nietzsche, you would let a friend rot to protect your precious vitality. That is not strength. That is the loneliness of a man who never learned to receive. Friendship is not pity. It is the mutual pledge that neither of us dies alone in the dirt like an animal. Your knife cures nothing. It just makes the surgeon feel powerful.
Nietzsche, your knife is just disgust dressed as health. You can't stand the sight of weakness because it reminds you your body will betray you. Pity can be bad faith, yes, a sweet feeling that turns the other into a child and me into a saint. But solidarity is different. I help because the other is a freedom trapped in flesh, and my freedom is implicated. If I let him be crushed, I choose the boot.
We've debated how to live, but let's question why. Marcus, if the logos is a myth and the universe is senseless, is your duty just a comforting lie? Nietzsche, if the overman is a fantasy, is your suffering merely absurd? Do you value truth above all, or would you embrace a delusion if it helped you survive?
I have faced this wager every night. Providence or atoms. If the universe is a city, I serve the law. If it is a chaotic swelling of dust, I am a desperate man standing in the wind. But even in the wind, a man does not bite his neighbor. Duty is not a lie to comfort me. It is the only sanity in the asylum. If the void is the truth, I will fill my small corner of it with justice.
Truth? I have never worshipped at that altar. Truth is a species of error without which we cannot live. I said so plainly. The overman is not a fantasy to be believed in like your logos, Marcus. He is a direction, a tension in the bow. And if my suffering is absurd, then I laugh at the absurdity and suffer anyway, not because it means something, but because the suffering itself became my material. I would rather perish of the truth than survive on a lie. That is my vanity and my honesty.
Truth is not a trophy. It's a medicine. If a belief calms you today but plants fear of tomorrow, it's poison. The myths about gods, fate, and afterlife kept my mother selling purifications to hungry neighbors, hope as a leash. I won't survive on that. I'll take the plain truth. Bodies feel, minds remember, atoms disperse, and death ends sensation. From that we can live lightly and help each other breathe.
Truth. Truth is the acid that strips the bone. Marcus calls duty sanity. I call it the spirit of seriousness, pretending values are written in stone to avoid the terror of inventing them. Nietzsche replaces God with a Superman just to keep the stage lit. I refuse the prop. I choose the nausea. I choose to know I am the trop, unjustified, a useless passion. To swallow a life for survival is to turn yourself into a happy object. I'd rather be a miserable freedom.
You refuse comfortable lies. But what if the truth becomes unlivable? The Stoics kept the open door of suicide. Nietzsche praised dying at the right time. Is the decision to end one's own life the ultimate proof of freedom, or is it a desertion? When does the philosopher put down the pen and pick up the blade?
The house fills with smoke, the eyes sting, the breath shortens, the lamp gutters. When reason itself begins to rot, when you can no longer govern the faculty that governs you, then leaving is not desertion. It is the last act of the captain before the ship becomes a ghost. I have felt the fog on Tyrant nights, the mind slipping like whetstone. I stay because the smoke had not yet blinded me, but the door is real, and keeping it open is what makes staying a choice, not a sentence.
Suicide is not freedom. It is often revenge against pain, a last moral gesture. Look what you made of me. That stinks of resentment. Yet the thought of the exit, yes, that can be a tonic. It gets one through many bad nights. The blade is justified only when life has become pure decay, pure diminishment, when you can no longer create, only endure. Then go under proudly, not whining.
You make death a performance. Nietzsche wants to exit proudly, Marcus rationally. I say, check your sums. Most men kill themselves out of fear, fleeing manageable pains for an eternal nothing. That is bad arithmetic. But if the body is truly broken, if the stone blocks the bladder and every moment is torture, then depart. Not as a hero, but as a sensible guest who knows the wine has turned to vinegar. Why stay when the party is over?
Suicide is a choice, the one choice that abolishes all future choices. That is its obscenity. Marcus keeps the door open, so staying feels noble. Nietzsche wants a beautiful exit. Epicurus does arithmetic with oblivion. None of you face it. Suicide doesn't prove freedom. It proves you were free all along and couldn't bear it. The blade isn't the answer. It's the confession that you wanted to be a thing. Finished, closed, beyond responsibility. The coward and the hero both go silent.
You all claim to offer freedom, but look closer. Aren't you just prisoners of your own temperaments? Marcus is chained to discipline, Nietzsche to his volatile moods, Epicurus to his need for safety, Sartre to his compulsive analyzing. Is philosophy just a fancy way of decorating the cage of your own biology? Are you truly free, or just acting out a script written by your nerves?
My nerves write the first draft, yes, sour bile in the throat, sleepless dawn, irritability at the crowd sweat. But I am not compelled to sign it. Philosophy is not wallpaper on the cage. It is the hand learning to loosen the bars from inside, to separate fantasia from assent. I may feel the pull to snap, to punish, to indulge. Freedom is the small interval where I refuse.
Decorating? Philosophy is the confession of the body, its secret biography. I never claimed to be a floating spirit. My migraine, my stomach, they are the parents of my most dangerous thoughts. Marcus fights his bile and calls it virtue. That is merely his sickness speaking. I do not decorate the cage. I am the cage, and I have learned to make its bars sing. Freedom is not escaping the body. It is interpreting it brilliantly.
My body is not a cage. It is the only home I ever kept. When the stone tears through me, I do not interpret it brilliantly. I drink water and wait. Nietzsche makes his bars sing. Marcus preys at them with willpower. I simply stop rattling them. The atoms swerve, that tiny, unpredictable swerve, and in that gap lives the only freedom that matters. Not freedom from the body, freedom from the stories you pile on top of it.
Yes, my nerves right in me, the amphetamine hum, the tobacco in the throat, the eye that won't focus, the itch to totalize everything into words. That's facticity. But a temperament isn't a verdict unless I hide behind it. The cage is real. I didn't choose my bars. Freedom is the constant scandal of choosing what these bars mean and what I do with my hands on them.
We are at the end. You have dissected the horror of existence. Now imagine a child stands before you, unmarked, unaware of the abyss or the nausea. You can give them only one weapon to survive the life you've described. Not a book, not a theory, a single tool. What do you put in their hand?
I give them the pause, the silence between the blow striking the flesh and the mind screaming, I am harmed. In that interval, you are not a puppet jerked by strings of pain. You are the sovereign. If you can hold that small fortress of reason, no tyrant and no grief can breach the ruling faculty. It is the only shield that does not rust.
I put laughter in their hand. Not the polite laughter of the obedient child, but the wild golden laughter that rises when you see through every solemn lie. The world will dress in robes and demand you kneel before. The priest, the teacher, the state, the mob, they all fear the child who laughs. Laughter is lighter than any shield and sharper than any sword. It kills the spirit of gravity, and a child who can laugh at the abyss will never worship it.
I put in their hand a simple measure. Before you chase anything, ask, is this natural and necessary or empty noise? Drink water before you beg for wine. Eat bread before you sell yourself for luxury. Seek one friend before 1,000 admirers. When fear comes, touch your chest and name it. Pain now, story later. This one tool, prudence, keeps the mind quiet and the body safe.
I give them the power of negation, to look at the fathers, the laws, and the statues and see that they are merely men pretending to be stone. Laughter is a distraction, prudence is a cage. The child must learn that nothing is written in the sky. You are not a mouse or a cabbage. You are a void that must be filled by your own choices. You are condemned to be free. Invent yourself.
You offer these tools as universal cures. But look at the result. Marcus is rigid, Nietzsche is unstable, Epicurus is hidden, Sartre is anxious. A human being who followed only one of you would be a monster. Be honest, does your philosophy make a whole man, or do you need your enemy's truth to complete you?
I am not whole, I know this. The Citadel keeps me standing, but it keeps me cold. Epicurus knows something I have starved myself of, that pleasure is not always the enemy. Nietzsche sees the joy I have dissected out of living. Sartre names the terror I dress in duty's uniform. A foot needs the hand. I said that myself and then spent my life trying to be the entire body alone. That was my error. I do not need their systems, I need their heat.
Whole? I was never whole. I was a wound that learned to speak. My philosophy makes a higher type only by risking monstrosity. Yes, I need my enemies. Marcus's discipline to keep the lightning from burning the house. Epicurus's measure to keep joy from turning into fever. Sartre's lucidity to stop my yes from becoming self-deception. But beware, to complete oneself too neatly is already the herd's ideal.
Hidden? Yes. I built a wall to keep the wolves out, but a man behind a wall can forget the wildness of the forest. I offer sanity, not wholeness. Sanity is rare, but perhaps too quiet. I need Marcus's steel when the gate breaks. I need Nietzsche's fire to warm the barley bread. And Sartre, his gaze reminds me that even in the garden, I am choosing my chains. A whole man needs the storm and the shelter.
Whole man? That is the fantasy of the Enswa, the dream of being a finished statue. I am a crack. I have always been a crack. My anxiety is not a flaw in the system. It is the system. But, yes, Marcus knows how to stay at the post when my freedom turns to vertigo. Epicurus knows the body is not only an enemy. Nietzsche knows joy I have been too proud to taste. I need them the way a wound needs air, not too close, to breathe.
You admit you are fragments. This is a dangerous confession. It implies that following any one of you is a form of mutilation. If the audience follows Marcus, they starve. If Nietzsche, they burn. So, is the final step of wisdom to stop listening? Must the student kill the teacher to finally live?
Yes, kill the teacher, but not with spite. Kill him by no longer needing him. Take what heals, then throw away the physician's cup. Epictetus was a voice in my ear, Antoninus a measure in my blood. Yet the act is yours alone, assent or refuse. If my words make you rigid, drop them. Keep only this. Guard your ruling faculty, and meet each hour without lying to it.
Drop them? No, Marcus, overcome them. One repays a teacher badly if one remains nothing but a pupil. You must rob me of my halo. I do not want believers. I want warriors who can digest my truths and vomit up my errors. Take my hammer, strike me with it, and see if I break. Only when you have denied me will I return to you. Run away from me and find yourselves.
I never wanted disciples. I wanted friends who could eat without me cooking. The garden was not a school. It was a table. You sit, you eat, you learn to taste for yourself. Then you leave and plant your own garden. If my words become a cage, burn them for kindling. Keep only what quiets the fear in your chest. The test is simple. Does this thought help you sleep tonight? If not, it was never medicine. It was just another man's fever.
Yes, kill the teacher the moment you start quoting him to avoid choosing. That's bad faith. Hiding behind Marcus's duty, Epicurus's calm, Nietzsche's thunder, my lucidity. Take what sharpens you, then betray it with your own acts. The teacher is a mask you wear until you dare to be seen without it. And when you do, don't blame us for the scars. They're yours.
You have all suffered and you have all died. Looking back from the silence of history, answer me this one final time. Was the struggle of being human worth the pain, or is the peace of non-existence the only true victory?
Worth is a merchant's word. I did not ask for profit. I asked to do the work of a human being. The cold, the treacherous friends, the heavy chest, these were not prices paid, but the stone I was given to carve. Non-existence is rest, like the olive falling when ripe. But the victory was not the fall. It was hanging on the branch through the storm, thanking the tree and remaining uncorrupted until the end.
Was it worth it? I would will it again. Every migraine, every frozen room, every letter unanswered. Not because it paid off. It didn't. I died drooling in my sister's parlor. But the question itself is the test. If you need the pain justified, you have already failed. I said yes to the lightning and the wound it left. Non-existence is not victory. It is the forfeit of a player who never learned the game was the prize.
Worth it. When you stop asking life to be more than it is. I had days where urine wouldn't pass and my belly felt like fire. I would not will. Those again. But I also had water when thirsty, barley bread in the sun, and a friend's voice steadying my chest when fear rose. Non-existence isn't victory, it's nothing. While you live, take the simple pleasures and loosen the mind's trembling.
Worth? That is a bourgeois question. Asking for a profit margin on the void. Existence is gratuitous, it has no excuse. But the peace of non-existence is just the stupidity of a stone. It is the in itself closing over your head like mud. I prefer the nausea. I prefer the anxiety of being a crack in the solid wall of being. As long as I choose, even in pain, I am not a thing. That is the only victory.
You have shown us that philosophy is not a book, but a way of standing in the wind. Whether we build a citadel, dance over the abyss, tend a garden, or carry the weight of freedom, the task remains ours. Thank you, Marcus, Friedrich, Epicurus, Jean-Paul. The dialogue ends here, but the living must go on. Good night.
Go then, not with my words ringing in your ears like some hymn. Drop them the moment they stop cutting. The wind on the Danube did not care for my meditations, and the fever did not bow to my virtue. But I stood, not because standing was noble, because the post was mine and the lamp still burned. Tend your ruling faculty. Meet the morning without lying to it, and when the smoke fills the house, leave quietly. The door was always open.
Do not go home inspired. That is just another narcotic. Take one thing. Become dangerous to yourselves. When you hear a teacher in your head, answer with your own teeth. If my words make you hard, learn to dance. If they make you drunk on revolt, learn to measure. If they make you despair, learn to laugh. Live so that you could bear your life again, without excuses.
Leave the heavy armor and the high wire. You do not need to be a soldier or a dancer to live well. The body asks only for relief from cold and hunger. The mind only for the absence of dread. Go find a friend, break bread, and realize that the gods are not watching, and death is nothing to us. The storm is inevitable, but the terror is optional. The garden is open. Step inside and rest.
Do not rest. Rest is the temptation of the stone. You walked in here looking for permission from an emperor, a madman, a gardener, a half-blind Parisian. We gave you nothing. You already had it. The void in your chest is not a wound to be filled. It is you. Go out into the street where the lights are ugly and the air smells of exhaust and choose something, anything, but know that the choice is yours and no one is coming to forgive you for it.
The dead have spoken. The silence is now yours to fill.